On Sunday, June 7th, we celebrate the second World Food Safety Day. The United Nations established World Food Safety Day by resolution of the General Assembly in 2018, acknowledging the urgent need to raise awareness at all levels and promote and facilitate actions for global food safety on the basis of scientific principles. We are excited that AFTO could hold this virtual event celebrating World Food Safety Day with the United States lead champion for food safety, Frank Yiannas. Frank Yiannas is a Deputy Commissioner for Food Policy and Response, a position he assumed in December of 2018. He is the principal advisor to FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn in the development and execution of policies related to food safety, including the implementation of the landmark FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. His leadership role within the agency covers a broad spectrum of food safety priorities such as outbreak response, traceback investigations, product recall activities, and supply chain innovation across the full spectrum of FDA-regulated products. Mr. Yiannas is in effect the agency's chief ambassador to reduce food safety risks and achieve high rates of compliance with FDA food safety standards, working to develop innovative collaborations with external partners and stakeholders and effective relationships with government and industry leaders, as well as consumers. A renowned food safety expert and author, Mr. Yiannas came to FDA from leadership roles with two industry giants, Walmart and the Walt Disney Company. Through his career, he's been recognized for his role in elevating food safety standards and building effective food safety management systems based on modern science and risk-based prevention principles. His experiences in the food safety arena have also made him an advocate for the promotion of a food safety culture to protect the world's food supply, arguing that science and policy are not alone enough. Advancing food safety also requires an understanding of organizational culture and principles of human behavior. Engaging on this level to help shape the organization's culture is the subject of his books, Food Safety Culture, Creating a Behavior-Based Food Safety Management System, and Food Safety Equals Behavior, and 30 Proven Techniques to Enhance Employee Compliance. Mr. Yiannas is the past president of the International Association of Food Protection and past vice chairman of the Global Food Safety Initiative. He is also an adjunct professor in the food safety program at the Michigan State University, and in 2017 was awarded the MSU Outstanding Faculty Award. A microbiologist by training, Mr. Yiannas received a BS in microbiology from the University of Central Florida and a Master of Public Health degree. Please join me in welcoming one of the food safety champions of the world, Deputy Commissioner Yiannas.
Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. Hopefully everybody can hear me well now. I am absolutely delighted and thrilled to have so many food safety heroes and champions on a call with me on a Friday afternoon, and to have this opportunity to talk with each and every one of you. I want to give you an update on the work that we've been doing on what we've been calling a new era of smarter food safety, an initiative that we announced last year. Many of you have heard. We are going to release that new era of smarter food safety blueprint soon. And when I say soon, in the coming weeks. It's a document that's been shaped by valuable input by many stakeholders, including many AFTO participants. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about World Food Safety Day, which, as you've just heard, is officially this Sunday, June 7th. It seems to me that it has never been more important for all nations at this critical time, not only all countries, but all states in our great country of the United States, all food safety professionals worldwide, whether you're in the public or private sector, to stand together to help keep people all over the world safe and healthy. Last year was the first time World Food Safety Day was celebrated, and its relevance was immediately clear to me. I was delighted to see that. In a global food system, I think we all know foodborne disease exists and it knows no borders. As long as foodborne disease exists somewhere in the world, we know it can exist anywhere in the world, like other infectious diseases. And this theme, food safety is everyone's business, I think just says it all. It's a good theme. Last year, I was fortunate in representing the FDA at a United Nations event on June 7th, where the FAO and WHO celebrated their first World Food Safety Day. It was a wonderful opportunity for me, a privilege and an honor to talk about how we can work together as one to improve the quality of life for consumers and people of all nations. The world has changed a lot since I gave that talk about a year ago, as we come together to fight the dangers of COVID-19. And with that change, in my view, as I've been reflecting, I suspect many of you have as well, I've got this clarity, and it's this. It's the hope. I believe it's the commitment. It's a responsibility embodied in that theme, World Food Safety Day, that are needed more now than ever before. And in my view, they're needed every day, not just one day a year, but 365 days a year. The calls to action on World Food Safety Day are ones that the FDA and our regulatory and public health partners are answering. I've seen it firsthand. FDA will continue to answer these calls, both in the response to COVID-19 and its everyday work to help ensure the safety of the food supply. There's a call for governments to manage food safety risks along the entire supply chain continuum, including during emergencies, as we've all experienced. There's a call for good food safety practices by farmers, by food processors to address potential risks and preventative controls in their operations. And it's through the implementation of FSMA, Congress's vision of a science and risk-based approach to preventing foodborne illness. The FDA has put standards, along with each and every one of you, in place on preventative controls on farms and in facilities to mitigate the risk of contamination and in foods produced domestically, as well as those imported from other countries. The new era of Smarter Food Safety Initiative will build on the foundation we've created through FSMA by using new technologies and approaches to build a more digital and traceable food system. During the pandemic, FDA postponed routine inspections, except for mission-critical situations, but we are working closely with federal and state partners such as yourself to monitor the food supply for signs of outbreaks. And we're using other tools, such as remote inspections, certain importers to verify compliance with food safety regulations. The food issues that have arisen during the pandemic have been complex, I can tell you. We know the virus is not known to be transmitted via food or food packaging. However, the global food supply chain has been rocked, literally rocked by other factors related to the pandemic. It's been a crisis of historic proportion. There's been unprecedented consumer demand that has led to temporary spot shortages. We've seen temporary closures of restaurants and schools and other places that serve food that have left many food producers without their normal paths for the marketplace. And the FDA has worked to provide the flexibility, packaging, labeling requirements needed in terms of temporary policies to help clear new paths to the retail market, to make sure that food got to the right places at the right time and to minimize waste. The calls to action also include empowering consumers at this critical time with the information they need to make healthy food choices. This has long been a priority for the FDA. Our nutrition innovation strategy announced in 2018 strives to empower consumers with information and facilitate industry innovation to create healthier products to combat the burden of chronic disease. What has not changed since last year is the global impact of foodborne disease, which causes, according to experts, an estimated 600 million cases of foodborne disease annually. About 1 in every 10 people worldwide will experience a foodborne illness. There will be, tragically, 420,000, think about that number, of deaths annually. Unless you think that it's something that happens in other countries and not here, in the United States alone, the CDC tells us, it's estimated that 3,000 people will die due to foodborne illness each year. And disturbingly, as you can see on this slide, recent results or reports from FoodNet data suggest that our progress in the battle against foodborne disease has stalled. And in fact, for many of the pathogens, they're actually more recently on the rise. And we at FDA, along with you, are committed to what we have been describing before the pandemic, to bending the foodborne illness curve. Now, I think with flattening the curve becoming household terminology as it relates to pandemic, people know what we mean by bending the foodborne illness curve. We also know that people are eating foods from all over the world more frequently. In the US, about 15% of all the food consumed is imported from about 200 plus countries around the world, including 32% of fresh vegetables, 55% of fresh fruit, and the lion's share of seafood products consumed by Americans comes from abroad. Food safety, without doubt, is clearly everyone's business. A World Food Safety Day page has been established at FDA and it has valuable information that I encourage you to review so you can learn more about what we're doing and what others can do to avoid foodborne illness. This day represents a challenge for us to stand together to do everything possible to protect food from contamination, no matter where it comes from in the world. Our shared mission on this day and all days is to keep consumers safe, no matter where in the world they live. And that brings me to what I want to talk to you about most today, and that's this new era of smarter food safety. In March, we were just a few days away from releasing our new era of smarter food safety blueprint when the FDA had to turn its focus to deal with the COVID pandemic. Our plans for the New Era initiative were rightfully put on hold in order for us to prioritize and deal with the crisis in front of us. As I said earlier, we'll be releasing the blueprint in the coming weeks fairly soon, outlining our plans, which is a long view plan over the next decade to create a more digital, traceable, and safer food system, one that I'm very excited about. The challenge that we have coming during the pandemic have made it clear that the actions that we had called about in the blueprint will strengthen how we approach food safety and security for the food supply, not only during the normal course of history, but especially during critical times such as a crisis. In fact, over the past few months, we've revised the blueprint in light of the lessons that we've been learning through the COVID pandemic. It's clear that COVID has accelerated the need for these measures, and I'll explain why. Some of the elements of the blueprint, I believe, are particularly meaningful now, and I'm going to touch on a few of these, beginning with tech-enabled traceability. Emerging technologies such as blockchain make it easier to track and trace products through the supply chain, from the time that they are grown or manufactured until they're purchased, and all the way back through the supply chain. When the agency originally developed our blueprint, we had identified new and emerging technologies, and we knew they'd be game changers in facilitating a more rapid traceback. We all know how important that is for food safety purposes and to investigate foodborne outbreaks. But what has become increasingly clear to us during this pandemic is that tracking and tracing foods, we believe, supply chain transparency and visibility, to potentially help FDA, to help you, to help the industry more rapidly adjust to the kind of marketplace imbalances that we've just seen and experienced from temporary spot shortages of certain commodities in recent months. And it could help us anticipate and mitigate the kind of food waste that we saw when food producers lost customers in restaurants, schools, and other entities. In other words, I strongly believe and am persuaded that a digitized food system is likely to be a stronger, more agile, interoperable, and resilient food system. I'm convinced of that. And so that is more needed today than ever before. Another area of our blueprint calls for the use of smarter tools for prevention. Not only tools, but approaches, such as root cause analysis, predictive analytics, the use of data to better understand the supply chain, anticipating where contamination might occur, disruptions. More real-time data and driven approaches will help ensure a stronger and resilient food system. And the new collaborative approaches outlined in the blueprint are ones that you'll see called tools, such as those that we've recently all had to explore, use of remote inspections, which we, as many of the states have done as well, have started as a result of the pandemic. And we believe that continue to advance these types of tools and approaches will be invaluable in any future public health emergency and could actually become new ways of working. Another area that we've talked about in the blueprint is the safety of foods ordered online. Safety of foods that you order digitally, delivered straight to consumers' homes, etc. We've seen this trend, as have you, steadily increase over the years, but recently has literally skyrocketed as families sheltering in place have ordered foods from restaurants and grocery stores online and by phone. For the first time ever, many folks that had never even dabbled in this area. In fact, before the COVID pandemic, we had reported data that had been obtained through research that said by the year 2025, 1 out of every $5, 20% share of food spent would be online over the next few years. But however, what we're seeing right now is one survey is reporting that 33% of US households are already using online grocery services. So the question has become even more important for all of us. How to ensure that these foods are produced, packed, and transported safely directly to consumers. And here again, the need for best practices and an industry standard of care have been accelerated by COVID-19. Many of the nation's retail food establishments have had to temporarily close, but they're reopening and returning to business. And as we've mentioned before, we know that we can't bend the foodborne illness curve without further advancing and strengthening not only these new business models, but our traditional retail food safety approaches. And the blueprint will highlight how we plan to do that, along with your help. And then last but not least, the new era speaks to something that I'm passionate about, the establishment and support of food safety cultures on farms, in facilities, and in homes across the country. I believe the pandemic has shined a light once and for all on what it truly means to have a food safety culture. It's about the people who work on farms, in facilities, accepting responsibility, not accountability, but accepting responsibility for producing safe foods and also keeping those people safe and healthy. It's about educating consumers on the best food safety practices when they cook at home, which have also seen increase, and taking responsibility and protecting each other. Is not just foundational for a food safety culture, but it mirrors, in my view, one of the primary lessons we've learned through COVID-19. And that is this, that we, as government, industry, and consumers, must all work together to help keep each other safe. Not because of rules and regulations, while they are real important, but simply because it's the right thing to do, and we're going to care about one another, and we do. For all the recent challenges, I've been greatly impressed by the resilience of the food system. I know some people have been critical of the food system, the imbalances and the shortages, but think about this. Despite the most historic crisis in our history, you can walk into a grocery store today and still find tens of thousands of SKUs, still at largely affordable prices, although we are concerned with the notion of increasing food prices. And despite all of these pressures and imbalances, consumers are still going into their stores, finding foods. That, I think, is a tribute to the commitment of the men and women who work every day. Every day they work hard to provide safe and affordable food. I've also been struck by partnerships during this pandemic. The positive impact that partnerships have made between FDA and our local, state regulatory friends, as well as other public health counterparts, as well as folks in CDC, OSHA. We've worked with all of our brethren in government, including the industry. We all have the same goals: to ensure that consumers have access to safe foods that they need, and we're doing that. Partnership is going to be a theme that you're going to see very strongly emphasized in the New Era Blueprint. And our partnerships, as I've mentioned, have really stepped up in a big way in a crisis. I've taken that to heart. The collaboration that we've seen between government and industry has been, I think, raised to several levels of magnitudes higher than it was before the pandemic. I think this idea of stronger collaborations is going to bode very well for our new era, which will rely on closer collaboration with FDA and our stakeholders, and AFDA, and members of the private sector. And I trust and I believe that we're going to count on each and every one of you to chart this new era together. I'd like to stop real briefly here just to take a moment to, once again, I do this every opportunity I get, salute the heroism of workers who have shown up to work every day. You know, they've not had the pleasure, those that work in the food and ag sector, to shelter at home or stay in place. They've been going to work to make sure they serve as a lifeline to the American consumer, anxious about having enough food during this critical time. It's these men and women that have encouraged me so much. The men and women that are working on farms and in food facilities, selling food in grocery stores and in restaurants, providing takeout meals, delivering foods to producers. They've been on the front lines of this pandemic. I know, like you, I've been watching more news than I normally do, and I've seen people often refer to the front line as what's happening in healthcare. And my hat's off I'm in awe of what this healthcare system has done to protect people in need. But there are more than one front line in this crisis, and food has been one of them, and the food industry has risen to the challenge. Our experiences thus far on our ongoing response efforts have reinforced, I think, for all of us at FDA, that this new era of smarter food safety is the right approach for our future. The lessons we are learning throughout this pandemic have helped us prioritize our goals by highlighting areas of greatest need. What are the new technologies, the new tools, the new type of thinking that are needed, and the new approaches? I am grateful for the dedication and commitment of the FDA staff and the agency's pandemic response. It's been something to see, very impressive, and their foresight into looking into the future. Even though the blueprint's going to be released while it was temporarily on hold, we continued our work. We began identifying short and long-term goals. We pulled together implementation teams while we were working on the pandemic, and we built an internal infrastructure needed to support this work. When the FDA announced last year the New Era Smarter Food Safety Initiative, the agency was convinced at that time that it was a good time. Now we know that these are the changes we should embrace, that we must all embrace, and that this is the path forward to a future, and we are all well equipped to protect the safety and security of this food supply, no matter what challenges we face. We will get there together, stronger, more resilient than ever. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner Yiannas, for your timely remarks. We look forward to working together with you on the new era and all your great work in that area. Thank you to all of our participants today. The world greatly appreciates your important work in helping to ensure a safe food supply, and we wish you all well today, and thank you for participating. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you.